In this video, I'm going to talk about 6 of the best 35mm focal length lenses that Pentax has ever made. I'm going to do a in-depth review, find out all their characteristics through a series of tests such as Bokeh, nighttime light transmission tests, f8 sharpness tests, light fall-off tests for that pop, that 3D image you're looking for. We'll see what other kind of tests we come along the way. First thing I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about how these things, which ones are in it, and how they handle. The first one that I've got is the first Japanese wide-angle lens ever made, the Takumar 35mm f4. This one is 4 elements in 4 groups. It's disputable on the internet whether it's 4 or 5 elements. It's 4. I've taken 3 of them apart. This one focuses down to 45 centimeters. It's got 10 aperture blades. There is no preset aperture and there's no auto aperture. This is a fully manual aperture. It almost appears to have a coating because if I look at it, it always has a little bit of a bluish tint, and I have 3 of these and they all have it, so it's possible this might have a little bit of a coating. I don't know. Focuses down to 45 centimeters, came out in 1957. The next one that they came out with is a faster 35mm, and based off the Pierre Ingenue design, reverse telephoto, reverse tessar. This one, the 35mm f2.3, it's an Auto-Takumar. It is the first Auto-Takumar, meaning that it had a lever that you cock down like this before you shoot, and it would allow you to focus with it wide open, and then the camera would stop it down to take the picture for you. This one uses 62mm filters. However, the Pentax catalogs called it a 65mm filter because of the fact that you need to step it up to at least that big to avoid vignetting. Also focuses down to 45 centimeters. This one is 6 elements in 5 groups, and it also has 10 aperture blades. Both of these two have 10 aperture blades, focused down to 45 centimeters. The next one that Pentax came up with was, well, it's not the next one, but the next one I've got in line, the super multi-coated Takumar. Now, they made several versions of this. There was a 46mm filter thread uncoated, a 49mm filter thread uncoated. This lens kept the same optical formula all the way through up until the K series. So there are K mount 35-35s that you can get that cost a bit more than these screw mount ones, but these lenses are super available. You can get them anywhere for really cheap, and is a renowned landscape lens. This one is 5 elements in 4 groups, and it's only got 5 aperture blades as opposed to these other 2 which had 10. There is a switch to go from auto to manual on this, and most people, I think, these days are going to be using it in manual. So if you accidentally switch it over to auto and you're wondering, why does it not go back? Is it broken? It's not broken. There's a very tiny little button that needs to be pressed to switch that back if it's not mounted on a camera. This one also focuses down 45 centimeters, not super close. So none of these are real close focusers so far. The next one I've got for us is the SMC Pentax 35mm f2. Now this is a much faster lens, quite a bit bigger than these two, and it's got a 52mm filtering, so it really feels like it has some weight to it. Focuses down to 35 centimeters, quite a bit closer than any of these 3s. It has 6 aperture blades, so it adds another one on in addition to this one, but it's got less than these. A very nice feeling lens, very heavy, robust. It's gonna feel like something in your bag. Now, another thing to know about this one, it's quite radioactive. The next one I've got for us is the 35mm M series f2.8. Now this one focuses down to 30 centimeters, so nice and close. It only has 5 aperture blades, and as long as we're talking aperture blades, the issue that these typically have, and mine does have it, is the aperture blades get sticky on the stop down. The same with the M Series 28, which looks almost identical to this one. They're about the same size, really nice and small. This one is 6 elements in 6 groups. No bonded elements in there. Kind of a medium number of elements for the 35mm lens. Not a lot of glass, and not the minimum either. It's kind of an in-betweener. Finally, the current production 35mm f2. This one is nice and small, very small for an f2. Compared to this f2, it's tiny. It's half the size almost. This one doesn't feel as metal and heavy as these, which is an advantage and a disadvantage both. Is it still strong and durable? I suspect that it is. Is it lighter in your bag? Definitely. This one's got 6 elements in 5 groups, and it also has 6 aperture blades. It's also got a floating element inside that is designed to give you a sharper focus throughout the focal range, whereas these all have a they just move. There's no floating element inside that moves differently from the rest. The hoods that go with these, I've brought them so I can show you what I'll use in the test, and then you'll know what you might like to use. The 35 f2 comes with its own hood. It's kind of nice. When you put it on backwards, it's got a little thing. You can remove it, and so you can still see what your focal distance is. And when you're using it, of course, you'd want to have it back on. It's kind of screwy, you know. It's kind of a pain in my hands. Screw-on metal lens hood for the 28, just a cheap Chinese metal lens hood, does the job. For the 35-2.3, I've got this rubber screw-on lens hood. Works really well. For the 35-3.5, I actually used the Takumar 28-3.5 hood. It fits just perfectly, and no vignetting, which kind of surprised me. But it's really the hood I like and looks cool, small. The Takumar 2.3 has the 62mm filter thread. However, you do need to step it up to at least a 65 to avoid vignetting. I'm using a 67mm wide-angle lens hood with this. And for the 46mm, I use again, a screw-on metal lens hood made for wide-angle lenses. Just a 46mm screw-on hood. So for these tests, that's what I'm going to be using. I'm using these on my Sony A7 bodies. I've got an A7 II and an A7s for the night stuff and dark light. This is what we've got. You ready? Let's go. Over here, some real cool ancestral Pueblo and petroglyphs. Rock art we can use. Find out what the bokeh looks like on all these lenses. Come on, let's have a look. That's a pretty good bokeh test, but for this next one, let's open each lens up as wide as it'll go and focus as closely as it will allow. That'll give us what the max bokeh looks like for each lens. Let's go see what we get for each lens as far as distortion goes. See how the area fades away from the sharp areas to the out of focus areas. I've had a good chance to really compare these lenses in really all conditions. I've used them for a good long time, all of them. It's time for me to give you a little bit of a conclusion about what I found after I looked at the results on the computer and what my findings were for each lens, what their strengths and weaknesses were. Starting with the oldest one, the 35mm f4. There's a lot of 3D pop in this lens. The 4 elements really shows. In fact, there is a difference between it and the 3.5 in pop factor. They're very similar lenses. However, this one, I just really like it. Its drawbacks, I would say, are the speed of f4. And it's got the most barrel distortion out of all of these lenses. I really like this lens, and it's for sure a keeper. The next one, the 35mm f2.3, the coolest thing about this lens is I'd say this one has maybe more character than any of these. The flares that it gives can be just amazing, and different flares in different situations. Everything from star flares to awesome circular disc type flares. A really nice lens. The first Auto-Takumar. They only made it for 2 years. It's quite rare, but a really nice lens if you can find it. It's big and bulky. That's one of the drawbacks to it. It's really big, and people notice you when you're carrying this lens. It's not nonchalant. But a very nice lens, and surely a collector's item as well. The 35 f3.5, this one holds true to its reputation as a phenomenally sharp lens. Very good color punch. Nice and contrasty. The 3.5 is faster, just a little bit faster, and I think you get less distortion when you compare these two lenses. They're quite similar, but I think this one adds 1 element over this one. This is 4, this is 5 elements. And what you get with that is a little bit more speed and a little bit less distortion with this one. What you get with this one is ever so slightly more 3D pop, but I think I can notice it. It's up to you, you can judge. Very nice lens. This one's cheap and super available. This one, although I have, is also quite radioactive, and I've de-yellowed it before I did my test. It still has a yellow tint if you compare it to, say, this one or the 35-35 or the M series 2.8. This has a yellowish tint. This one has a little bit of a yellowish tint. This one, not so much, I wouldn't say. And this one, the newest one, has a little bit of a magenta tint. So they all have a little bit different tint to them. The 35 f2, it's big, it's heavy, it's radioactive. Not sure if that's a thing you want to worry about or not. I do. A very good lens. If you want bokeh, this is there's nothing like it. Nothing matched it. Others were close. It also focused closer than these three. From the K series, the M series, and the FA autofocus one, they all focus much closer than these older ones. So if close focusing is an issue for you, then you might want what I say is the best all-rounder. If you're only going to have one, this is the one. 35 2.8. The bokeh is phenomenal for how fast it is, and that's because it focuses really close. And it really compares with the bokeh lenses as far as bokeh comparisons, especially for the price. The size, it's tiny, it's small, super sharp, and nice contrasty punchy colors. What surprises me the most when I did this comparisons was this lens has a lot of 3D pop. I really like this lens. I may only use this lens from now on. This is the one. If you only want one, this is the one. The problem again is check your apertures. They might stick, if that matters to you. It doesn't to me. Really, this is a great lens. Underrated. Man, everybody should have. If you only have one, this is the one I'm carrying. If I don't know what I'm using, this is the one. Okay, and the one that probably the most of you are looking at here, because it's in current production, the Autofocus FA. This is a really good lens, super sharp. There was nothing that compared to it as far as sharpness at all focal distances. Really sharp lens, really nice hood. This lens is sharper than the rest, and that's because of the floating element. And I'd say throughout the range, now when I say sharper, I mean higher resolution, because it does not have the same pop factor as some of these others, in my opinion. I prefer the 2.8 pop factor to this. I also prefer the 3.5 or the f4. Any of those I think has more pop, and even I think the f2. I think this has less pop. Beautiful bokeh though, so there is the separation, but as far as but the light fall off and the pop, it's not there like these others. It's not the same. There's a sacrifice for having a small f2. When I focus back and forth, there is a jump in focus, and it's a little bit of a annoyance, a kind of a bounce. It's not as smooth as the others, and that's not just my copy as far as I can tell, because I've tried more than one copy now. Really, if you want a sharp lens with really punchy contrast, maybe more contrast than these others, it's really contrasty. There is an issue that I did not appreciate with it as much as I could have, and that is the color. It didn't seem to match my blue coatings. This is kind of more of a magenta colored coating on this one, I think, and it shows in the images. I wouldn't notice it probably if I didn't do the side-by-sides, but there was a difference, and this one comes a little more magenta than most of my Pentax lenses. So if you're going with the modern Pentax lenses, you may want to stick with those modern coatings on all of them, because they render an ever so slightly different color. I don't mind the plasticky feel on this one. It's really not plasticky feeling. It's heavy, it's tough, it's, you know, I really do like the construction of it. And a very crystal sharp, clean lens. If you're only going to have one and bokeh and close focusing is an issue, this might be your one. If autofocus is an issue, this is definitely your one. That's my take on these lenses.